Thank you for joining me here at the Texan.
Thank you, Cameron.
And you just won your primary race. And what have you sort of been doing in the meantime? There's a bit of a lull in things, there's runoffs, but what have you been doing since you won?
Sure, so there is a little bit of a lull. You know, I was blessed to have won this primary by almost 40 points. It's really been humbling, the outpouring of support from the grassroots. But moving into the general election, I think a big mission for me is to continue the trajectory and a lot of what I did in the primary, which is making a big effort to meet with people face to face and be available. And so a lot of my work is finding new communities, different people that I can meet with and just give them an opportunity to get to know me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have reacted very positively to that because I'm a born and raised Dallas guy. I'm raising 3 kids in this district. That's what's driving me at the end of the day, is to make Collin County the #1 place for families in the state. And having that kind of a message and outreach has been really effective, and I think it's going to continue to be effective in the general election. So for me, sure, there's been a little bit of a lull, there's no doubt. You know, the district to the north and east of me are both in very high profile runoffs.
Right.
So I'm not going to deny that, but I have been taking advantage to just start reaching out to a lot of people. And one example I'll give you is the UTD campus, which is actually really close to where I live. And you know, recently was the site of a really disturbing kind of demonstration there that, you know, what I'll say is it wasn't terribly surprising to see that kind of encampment in UT Austin.
Yeah.
I'm still shocked by what we saw in UTD, and so a few weeks ago I was fortunate enough to be able to address some of the students there on campus, and it's really encouraging to see the engagement from
Right.
more and more students to say something's not right here.
Yeah.
You know, it's really disturbing to see calls for violence and criminal activity. I'm all for free speech. I'm all for having disparate, you know, views, but that's not what was going on there.
Right.
And we've seen even faculty members involved in that. And so that has been an area of focus for me,
Yeah.
is reaching out on campus and saying, look, it's great to have an academic institution that stands for free speech and is a place where all different kinds of viewpoints and nationalities can gather. But first and foremost, we have to have security, we have to have law and order. That's been really well received.
Yeah.
And I think people that didn't think of themselves as political before are kind of like, what's going on and what can I do to stop this kind
Yeah.
of criminal activity? So that's something I've been working on.
Yeah, and we saw the interim committee on higher education sort of address the anti-Semitism that's occurring on campuses. We
Yeah.
saw Greg Abbott issue an executive order addressing anti-Semitism. What do you think there's anything additionally that needs to be done to address those issues, or is it just the enforcement of what's already on the books?
Yeah, I would lean towards the last part of what you said. It's the enforcement of what's on the book. I think what's changed, though, is we have clear communication now, so there's no kind of doubt of what's allowed and what isn't. You cannot appropriate public property, a university campus, and an encampment or kind of occupation type of activity.
Right.
If you want to declare your support or lack of support for, you know, a particular cause, then that's allowed in the state of Texas, but you cannot take over public property. The second piece is you cannot sort of masquerade calls for violence against a group of people, in this case Jewish people, and say, well, this is just kind of the same kind of benign political speech of any other cause, when that's just simply not the case. And it's particularly important in Collin County and in the communities around UTD, because we have a very large Jewish population there. These people are our neighbors. And I think it's important that we let them know we don't stand for this. For paid agitators calling for violence against our neighbors is not something we're going to support in the state of Texas. I think Governor Abbott's been an effective leader in this regard, and I really support the way that he's approached it.
Yeah, and I want to talk about another issue, is artificial intelligence, AI. We saw the Texas legislature establish an AI council. They issued an interim report. You've sort of had your eye on this issue. Tell me a little bit about how AI is going to be working in the Texas legislature.
Sure. So it is an issue that I'm deeply interested in, because I'm a believer that we have to embrace innovation. I think AI is something that is along the sort of evolve or be left behind kind of disruptive technologies, right up there with the internet itself, with the telephone, with electricity. And so I don't view it as optional. I view it as either an opportunity or a threat, and I think we need to embrace it as an opportunity. In terms of the Texas legislature, you know, in the 88th, they did pass a law that created the AI Advisory Council. The activity in that council has primarily been around the use of AI within the Texas government, within entities in the Texas government. What I've seen there is that many, if not all, are already engaging in some shape or form with the technology, which just further confirms what I just said,
right.
that it's not optional. It's here. So I think that's been confirmed through their work. One specific thing that I will point to, though, that's very clear, and I think this is a good thing, is that the state of Texas, the committee, has really rallied around and has been clear that we protect children in the state of Texas. There are different levels of protections and an interest of the state when it comes to children, and particularly and maybe most heinous, child pornography. And so in some of the hearings that have been had, it's really been uncovered that there are some gaps in the existing laws that we have that are intended to prevent child pornography that were created at a time before a kind of technology that could create that kind of illicit content, but it isn't a specific person. Maybe it looks like a person, but it isn't a specific person.
Right.
And so the law is meant to protect specific physical people. I think, and I think there's an emerging consensus, that should be applied to all illicit content that is child pornography. We're not going to allow that.
Right.
In the state of Texas.
Right.
I expect that there will be early and clear and decisive action to update the laws in Texas to ensure that we're protecting children, that we're standing against child pornography. One of the other things that I'd like to see more discussion around, and I think it's something where we can really lead, is embracing innovation from open source models.
Right.
We've seen legislation coming out of the state of California that's more or less what you would expect from California, which is to centralize control, to centralize oversight, to create new government bureaucracies that are not beheld to the people through elections, that have kind of vague powers that almost always end up siding with the largest incumbents. In this case, that would be the big tech companies that we're all familiar with, Microsoft, Google, and so forth and so on.
Right.
I think it's important that Texas say, we believe that open source innovation is free speech, that transparency is the best way to prevent bad actors from taking a technology and using it for ill gains. And that's a debate that I think is going to be really interesting, that we can lead in as a state and say we are a pro-liberty, pro-innovation state.
Right.
We're going to protect children. We're not going to allow for this kind of perverse use of a technology. But overwhelmingly, this innovation can be positive, and we should embrace and support that it be transparent through open source. Which, by the way, the company that created ChatGPT, OpenAI, was originally created as an open source company, and then as this technology has become more and more profitable, we've seen what I would describe as a sleight of hand, where they've maintained the OpenAI moniker, but it's a closed source model at this point.
Right.
I think that's okay. It's okay to have that as a business model. One of their primary competitors, Anthropic, has a model that from the beginning has been closed source. That's allowed. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. But we also have to be clear that it is not open, and that where we can, both as a government and as an economy, we should embrace open source innovation. And I think that's the best way to ensure that we protect ourselves from a lot of the problems that could come from kind of a general intelligence.
Yeah, and you're touching on a lot of issues related to these emerging technologies. You said in your campaign announcement, this is about decentralization. What do you see as something like cryptocurrencies or blockchain playing into how to not just securing people's data, but also with maybe securing elections?
Yeah, so I really got interested in cryptocurrencies and digital assets as a technology from that philosophical perspective of decentralization, which I think is the fundamental founding principle of the United States, is replacing a centralized monarchy with a constitutional republic. And as we continue to transition into a digitally native economy, where more and more of everything that we do as individuals is actually digitally native, then I do think it's important as a pro-liberty state, which the state of Texas is, to embrace and look at ways that we can take advantage of digital assets and distributed ledgers that help to promote that kind of decentralization. Now, I will say this, when it comes to elections, I proceed with extreme caution.
Right.
I proceed with extreme caution. I am not yet at a point where I'm going to actively advocate that we implement some kind of digital distributed ledger kind of enabled voting system. Do I think there's a potential future for encryption to be better used to make our elections both safer and easier to audit? Because at the end of the day, it is really absurd that we have disputes in our elections and it takes weeks, if not months, to appropriately audit an election. There is a potential role for encryption there. I think we can continue to monitor that, but I lean more in towards the camp of more paper ballots, which have worked, as opposed to this kind of continuous innovation that has shown itself to have holes and vulnerabilities. So I reiterate, I proceed with extreme caution when it comes to innovation around our elections. I think there are a lot of really valid concerns that anything digital opens you up to a potential hack. There's a lot of room for digital ID technologies to be matured in the private sector in applications that are not as sacred as our elections.
Right.
And I think that will continue to happen, particularly as it pertains to people wanting to own more of their data, their digital ID, in an application where through cryptocurrencies you could be rewarded for participating in different kinds of economies with your data and sharing that when and if you're ready for it. There's a lot of healthcare applications for that. If you'd be willing to share your health data, but you opt into that.
Right.
You freely opt into that in a way where there's a willing buyer and seller, and that encryption helps you to have better ownership of your data. So I say let the private sector continue to de-risk that, and let's monitor it, but I do not advocate for further kind of digital applications or certainly cryptocurrency applications in our elections at this time.
Yeah, well, I think you just provided a lot of interesting insight into these emerging technologies. You're headed into a primary, or not a primary, a general election. What's a message you want to send to voters before they head to the polls?
I think one of the biggest things that we struggle with in not just Texas, but throughout the country is apathy. And so I'd like to set the stage a little bit for House District 70 and why I think it's so important. This is a district that has really only existed for one election cycle. Of course, there was a House District 70, but this new redrawn House District 70 essentially touches none of the old district, which was primarily a McKinney-based district, further north in Collin County. So for all intents and purposes, this is a completely new district. And in the last election, the margin of victory was just over 850 votes, which was the second or third closest in the state. Very, very close election. And so to the people that feel, well, maybe my vote doesn't count, or they kind of get disparaged, this is absolutely not the case.
Right.
In HD 70, it counts enormously. And what's unique about this is, a lot of House districts could be 3 or 4 counties. It could take hours for a representative to drive across that. I can drive across this district in 20 minutes. If someone goes to my website, votestevekinard.com, and you send me a message there and you want to meet me, I will make sure that happens. Right. That's a difference in this election. That's how I won the primary.
Right.
I go to events and I respond to people. And so that's what's going to make this election unique, is I think that people can really actually be heard in this election. The second thing I'm going to say is, there's kind of an assumption, I think. We're Texas, we're the land of Texas values, of family values, and frankly, we've seen that kind of fall short, I think, in a lot of ways, particularly in our schools and the rights of parents to be the primary decision makers in the upbringing of their children. I have 3 young children. I have a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 9-month-old. That's who I'm fighting for. And I think HD 70 hasn't had an opportunity yet to have a pro-family parent saying to them, I'm here to first and foremost make sure that this county is the #1 place that families want to continue to move. And so that's going to be, I think, a new and unique kind of discussion that I want to make sure that people have an opportunity to have that kind of representative. I encourage them to reach out to me. I love to listen and learn as well. I don't know everything about everything, and so I'm humble enough to say, help me. You know, I work for this district. I represent the people of House District 70, and I need to listen to their concerns, and that's what I want to do in this election. So again, I encourage people to reach out to me at votestevekinard.com. I want to hear from people, and I thank the Texan for having a presence here to bring this kind of message to people and let them get to hear from candidates more in a little bit of a longer format, so it's not just kind of sound bites and whatnot. And that's what I want to tell people is, reach out to your representative, meet them, talk to them, ask them questions, and we shouldn't just resolve ourselves to kind of have everything take place on Twitter, you know? And I'm excited to do it. It's something that I didn't see coming in my life, but I felt called to do this because of my 3 young kids. We have to do better than what we're doing right now. We have to make this a place where families can prosper and be the foundation that we build this society on. So that's what I'm all about, and just honored really to have this opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining me here at the Texan, and we'll be following you during the general.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
God bless Texas.